Hello and welcome to the Gambling Files. I am one of your hosts, John Bruford, joined by your other host, Fintan Costello. Hello, Fintan.
Hello, John.
Hi.
Hi.
You notice that I didn't have any sort of pithy line about where the podcast that blah, 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 blahs this episode.
I did notice that, yeah.
I'm trying a more kind of, the whole fake it till you make it idea.
I am familiar with it.
I'm trying, well, you obviously see it in your fellow board members, but not in yourself as the chairman.
That'll be the imposter syndrome speaking, John.
But
go on.
What I'm trying out is a sort of a mature, sort of a
optimized for YouTube version
persona.
This is okay.
So I do things like I was the first out with my garden waste recycling bin on Sunday, for example.
And is it just like you're saying, fuck it, the bin's full, I'm taking it outside and it'll sit there till it's collected? Or was it deliberately like, no, it's coming on
collection
Monday
day is not till Friday. No, seriously though, collection day was Monday and I was the first out in this cul-de-sac with it.
Wow.
Which, in a cul-de-sac of retirees, Fintan, that is no mean feat.
Is that like a real stake in the ground moment where you're trying to, is that like asserting dominance kind of thing?
It's very much a fuck you to the people around me.
That they just don't care, that kind of thing? Nice.
I
like it.
I think we're going to see exactly who cares next recycle.
Who wants it the most? Yeah, he's up at 6 a.m. Sure, right.
6 a.m. the day before.
Nice. Good.
Yeah, I'm just seeing how it fits. I don't think it's going to fit well, but
is this because you're 50 now? Is that the thing? Is it part of your like?
I am 50 now. Got a doctor's appointment coming up. That's exciting.
Oh yeah, is it in the
what?
The get the prostate checked, that kind of doctor, or like just a take your temperature kind of doctor? Oh, what are we talking about here?
What do you mean?
Well, once you get to a certain age, you need to get these things checked on a regular basis, right?
Maybe in Ireland you do.
Dutch doctors. Show me your medical degree. I'm sure a finger would have been enough.
Yeah, just the old aches and pains and all that. It basically happened the day after my birthday. I just woke up and I just
like
ached.
Well, you don't drink, so it couldn't be the hangover. It was just a late night, was it? It was just you were up late.
Maybe, yeah.
Maybe dancing, karaoke. Maybe you threw a karaoke muscle.
It's possible. I do flex a lot whilst karaoke.
I could imagine a lot of hip thrusting.
You can't imagine.
I'm Tom Jones style swagger is what I've got in my head.
Yeah, using the word swagger though, that is quite amusing.
I suppose you got to be taller for a swagger, right? It's more of a waddle.
No,
is that what we're talking
you'd
about?
be surprised. You'd be surprised.
Yeah,
you can strut at any height. No, I was just remembering many years ago. I was out and about with Lorna, graphic designer to the industry-leading podcast, The Gambling Files.
She is wonderful.
And her best mate Katie, and we're out and about, and they would have been, 14, maybe 13, 14, 15, that sort of age. And I was just strutting along as I do, and I heard Lorna behind me taking the piss out of me, and she had added a sound effect to my walk. Every time I took a step, she was like, swagger, 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 swagger. I'm like, and nobody's going to strut for me.
Damn straight. Own it. Work it.
Fuck yeah. Yeah, and get fucking hips like this and not use them. Although they appear to be barely functional these days. But anyway. So you're all right, are you?
Yeah, I'm good.
Business good? Chairpersoning?
Yeah, life as a chairman's is good. Helping a few companies, do some bits and pieces. yeah, doing a bit of advisory stuff, which keeps me busy. And, call it the seagull effect. Come in, make a load of noise, shit over everything, leave. It's brilliant. No responsibilities.
That does sound good.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. I don't know. But yeah, just doing a few bits and pieces, some interesting little projects, or people are at a certain stage where they just need a bit of, maybe try that, maybe try this, or let me introduce you to this person or introduce you to that person. And yeah, that's interesting. And then, yeah, just enjoying the summer in Amsterdam. The weather's been nice the last few weeks, and enjoying my new apartment, which is nice. We've nearly got all our furniture. Got light switches the other day. It's a big fucking step. Big step. Or light switches I had light switches, but now I've got light switches that work.
That is different.
It is. It's a game changer. It really is. It's the little things. John. And yeah, that's about it, really.
Do you know what I found in my house? Like I rent my house, and I like my landlords because I never hear from them ever. But equally, I think it's fair to say they've taken a minimal care approach to the building. Basically, every fixture and fitting, even the door handles, the bathroom, the kitchen, all of that, it's all the original. And the house was built in 1972. So that means, for one thing, that the number of power outlets is hopelessly inadequate. But what it also means is that anything that's made of plastic is prone to shattering 52 years later.
Yeah, of course.
I swatted a fly on the light fitting at the top of the stairs, and it turned out to be a big mistake.
It's probably made of Bakelite or something. Some shit that wasn't even plastic.
Well, interestingly, I've put a Bakelite lamp at the top of the stairs to use instead of the overhead light, because I just fucking shattered it when I swatted a fly. And there's a vent outside because we've got a solid fuel fire. And so you've got to have an air vent if you've got UPVC windows, right? Because it's got to have a through flow of air, so you don't die and stuff accidentally. And Joe, and I saw him do this. He just rested his fingertips on the outside of the vent, and it just fucking shattered under his fingertips. It's like the plastic's gone so brittle over time.
Yeah,
that
for sure. Did he think he had like superpowers though? Was it like one of those, like, I think I've just done that?
No, Fintan. I realized what was happening immediately, but I didn't tell him. I let him think he was in deep shit for a while.
Can't believe you broke that.
That's the most important part of the house. We could all die now.
Jesus Christ.
Etc. I'm sure in years to come, when he's undergoing his own therapy process, he'll look back on this and he'll say, I can't believe I didn't realize he was joking.
I didn't sleep for 3 days.
He did. He just had to sleep in the garden.
Oh, dear.
It's part of the punishment. Well, I'm in Wales and it's illegal to beat children now, so he can't go without punishment. Yeah,
it's the same here. And my son was teasing me about it one day, and I said, but you'll be dead before the police arrive, so it doesn't matter. I wasn't expecting that.
I did one in a pet shop, which got me
to the anaconda.
it got me some seriously stern glares, because the pet shop is in the next biggish town, which is Leominster.
What's it called?
Leominster.
Leominster, okay.
Spelled Leominster. And Leominster is in Herefordshire, which is in England. And I shouted across to the boys. I was with Annie. I shouted across to the boys, you better behave in here because we're in England and I can legally beat you.
That's pretty funny. We're not in Wales anymore, you know.
Yeah.
Don't make me drive you over the border. Fucking finish it.
Well, from my house to the border of England, it's only probably... It's about 500 meters, I think, depending on which direction you go.
You could drag them over the border, and that's fine.
Totally. Or coerce them with the program. I just get the ice cream man to stop on the other side of the border, and we'll just be like, "Oh, kids! Oh no, he can't come over here. Something about Diesel. Let's go to him.
Ruin ice cream forever.
The ice cream man, though, he does know where we live. Bastard. He does. He stops outside the house now. But anyway. So, Fintan, I'm not sure which episode we're doing this for. So who's our guest?
Our guest, I believe, is Isabelle Zanzer.
Oh, yeah.
Of CompliancePlay. What's the word for somebody who speaks lots of languages? Polyglot?
Not polyglot, is it?
Is it a polyglot?
Well, that'll work.
Well, let's make sure we know what words we're using. Yes, knowing or using several languages. So we've got the polyglot.
Thank you for remembering.
Isabelle.
Isabelle is as well.
Well, she is. You're not. You're something very different, John. And yeah, so Isabelle's really clearly super smart, and CompliancePlay is, the name says in the tin, is a compliance consultancy business. And I think her approach is, the kind of compliance person that you want, of solutions orientated and let's make this work, rather than just saying no, which I thought was really interesting. Once it becomes really obvious when you hear how passionate she is. And I think as well, we were talking about health washing as a concept, which is where, it's a bit like sports, like, I don't know, so Saudi Arabia is getting accused of sports washing. So using sports to hide the fact that they've, killed journalists and stuff like that. So you focus on the golf, or the fact that Ronaldo or whoever's playing over there now, and not on the fact their human rights record. And with something like health washing, you can see it in different industries. And then for the gambling industry, it would be maybe hiding behind or faking a responsible gambling policy. And I think that, for me, I love PR. I think that's a really interesting concept. And I think there's we dig into it, which is really nice. And then her PhD thesis of studying problem gambling in Ukraine during a war is super fascinating, and I think opens up some really interesting things. And like I said, she's just insanely intelligent and really passionate about what she does. And yeah, it's the kind of compliance person you'd really want on your team. Like, just make it go away. Just fix stuff. And if I can make money as well, that'd be really, really good, please. And that's what she's passionate about. So yeah, Isabelle's wonderful. I think she's going to be a regular guest.
Nicely summarized. Thank you very much. Have you watched any of the new episodes of Cobra Kai?
No.
I haven't either.
I've just stopped caring.
But I've only not, because they're dropping them in sort of tranches. Oh,
they're doing that, like trying to drag it out bit thing. Yeah, I'm not.
Well, they might have just not wanted to wait until next year for it, but I think that's not the case.
Yeah, I got kind of it just became very repetitive, because it was basically the same story just being retold, and now he's the good guy and he's the bad guy, and they just kept flipping it, and I just
yeah, but it's the last season.
I know. It didn't.
And there's bound to be another surprise in store.
I'm sure. They all die or something at the championship. There's a bomb.
That could happen.
Yeah. So yeah, I've stopped.
Should we get Cobra Kai tattoos?
No.
Why not?
However, I did get an email about the red jacket, and the red jacket's back, and it wasn't in store or in stock for your birthday. That was meant to be the gift, but it wasn't. I couldn't get the red jacket.
Was it like a bowling jacket?
No, it's a leather jacket that what's his face wears. The red leather jacket.
Wow.
I know.
Not everybody could pull off a red leather jacket, Fintan.
I think you could.
I think I could too.
You need a swagger for a red leather jacket.
I don't need a swagger anymore. Holy
God,
shit.
This show is so scripted. God.
It would, if I swaggered anymore, I would quite literally dislocate a hip each time I took a step. But as you say, it could also probably be described as a waddle. But I have only one. There's only one thing I think in my life that I really wished I'd bought at the time, and it's actually influenced the way that I've shopped since. Because I firmly believe that if you see something and you love it, or if you see something and you think of somebody else when you see it, that you should buy it.
Okay, that could get very expensive.
No, assuming that you're not, completely devoid of self-control.
Oh, okay. It's enough for you, Fintan. For regular folk.
us normies. And so when I was about 25 or 26, I was living in London, having a whale of a time, earning really quite decent money, pissing it all up the wall. And I was walking through very, very central London and somewhere near Carnaby Street, and there was an office shoe store there.
Oh, yeah.
And they had a pair of black and white snakeskin Chelsea boots.
Nice.
And I just I was walking past, glanced in the window, saw them. They registered 5 steps later, and I walked backwards to the window to holy shit. And my girlfriend at the time was like, you should totally buy those. And I'm like, I'd look like a dick in those. And she's like, well, no, you wouldn't, but also you love them. You clearly love them. And I really, to this day, I wish I bought them. Kind of boot where, you spend 120 quid or whatever on them then, and you'll have them resold and they would probably still be with me now. And I've had an eye out for a similar shoe ever since, and I've seen nothing. I do regret not buying that shoe. Do you have any missed purchases you wish you'd done? Sensible things.
No, I have everything. No,
if you can call a black and white snakeskin Chelsea boot sensible.
I'd wear it. I don't think so.
Can I ask you a question here? I've just had a really weird flashback because I was just thinking to myself, I'd wear them to a fucking job interview. And I remember going to a job interview and I'd have been about 20. Actually, no, it was not that long after. I'd have been 26 or 27. I went to this job interview in Norfolk. And I went wearing a combination that I thought was just the dog's bollocks.
Go on.
I was wearing it was a very dark red shirt, like almost a burgundy.
Okay.
And a gold tie.
Festive.
But I go into the interview and the guy was like, that's a very confident combination. I'm like, huh?
I'm a big dick too, mate. As you sit down, go on. What are you meant to say to that?
The implication was, of course, I don't give a fuck what you think.
Who's interviewing who here?
I got the job.
Of course you did. Project confidence. That's 90% of it, mate. So it is. It's 90% of it.
That's lucky because that's all I've got. I've got the opposite of imposter syndrome, I think.
that must be nice. That must be nice.
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay. Okay, so let's go and meet Isabelle.
No, hang on.
Did I miss something, Fintan?
You did miss something. Just before we just slide away there, let's thank our sponsors.
Hang on, just
who make all of this happen.
Just let me check and see if the payment's cleared. Hold on.
Yeah, we'll let you know which sponsors in a second. Well, we can crack on with Optimove. That's all fun.
Oh, hang on. The fucking Face ID doesn't recognize me if I smile. I might have to do this again.
All right, Specky. Take your glasses off. So
it's just Optimove today.
Yeah. iGaming industry's #1 CRM platform. Or CRM software. They're brilliant. We say it every week. Get the demo. Just go get the demo. Get the demo. Get the demo.
Get the demo.
I have a bunch of friends at different companies who use it, and you kind of say, look, is it actually that good? And they're all super happy. So it really does save you money and make you money and all that stuff. It pays for itself. Basically, it's free.
I'm not sure we can say that.
Well, if you think of the ROI, I'm sure it all works. It all backs out. Prove me wrong. You go buy it and prove me wrong. Link in the notes and click through and book a demo, and lovely salesperson will walk you through it. Do all that kind of great stuff.
Yeah, what Fintan said. And more sponsors soon, as soon as the check clears.
No pressure, lads.
Yes, pressure. Fintan, as is mentioned in next episode, I've got to buy a fucking car. I don't want to.
Is this one of these but the Porsche was calling to me. I had to buy it.
I was walking past the window.
Where are the kids going to sit? Fuck the kids.
It's got a trailer hitch, hasn't it? Surely.
I'll get them an Uber. It'll be fine. John needs a new Porsche, so sponsorships available or something. It's probably not the right message. It's probably not the right message, but
I need a new vehicle. I need a new cheap old secondhand car.
Yeah.
Anyway, meet Isabelle. Welcome to this week's guest. I say this week's guest. Maybe we've got 2 episodes. Maybe we've got 1. I don't know. I really don't know. I don't really keep track of things anymore. Fintan's more the logistical brain of things. I'm really just the pretty face and nice outfits of the Gambling Files podcast. We're joined by our guest, Isabelle Zanzer, superbly named and possibly the first person with 2 Zs in their surname that we've ever had on the podcast, I think. Isabelle, welcome.
Thank you.
Now, you are co-founder of CompliancePlay, so probably better kick off by saying, what did CompliancePlay do?
We are your not so typical, I would say, regulatory consulting firm. We do regulatory technical consulting. We offer math services with our team. I work with someone who is incredible in the industry called Maritza 8. She has 18 years experience in the industry through various roles. And we met working at a different consultancy. And we just very much clicked. And we started our own. And the feedback has been so positively overwhelming. Because I really learned, being a compliance officer before, that the word compliance, or even someone who's a compliance officer, was so unpopular. I usually got stares when I said, I'm a compliance officer. People were like, we have to go. I'm going to go. I'm going to leave. And I really didn't understand because I started quite young. I started working in the law firm, then in financial regulation. I ended up in gambling. And so Maritza and I, what we really wanted to do is rebrand compliance. We even now call it risk management more, so not to scare people off. But I think the phenomenon was that people thought a compliance officer is, the schmuck that goes to Burning Man or Tomorrowland with a clipboard and saying the music cannot go more than X decibels.
They are considered the killjoys of the industry.
Killjoys. And what we do, and that's what our clients often say, is we actually make sure that the festival, is top notch. The lights are brighter. The music is harder. Just that everything is set up perfectly, like the setting, in order for everyone to thrive. And that's really what CompliancePlay is all about. It's just about understanding that this is an industry that wants to make money, like every other industry, but also that you have ethical responsibilities towards your players in addition to, following the law. So we're kind of hoping, and I dare to say we're on our way to kind of rebrand what is compliance. So I no longer get looks from people who say, compliance officer, we're going to go the other way. See you.
It's such a good point because you definitely encounter, and you see it as well with say in-house counsel or law firms and stuff as well. There's it's our job just to say no to everything. That's it. Just the first response is no.
Yes. Or
there's those rare unicorns who are like, okay, look, I can see what you're trying to do. This is what the law says. This is what we need to do. And here's maybe, so they start looking for solutions, right? And they start looking to, okay, how can we problem solve this? And how can we do that? And that's such a rare thing because normally it's like, no, it's like, I'll get, if we do this, I'm going to get sacked. So I'm not taking any risks and I don't care about your targets or what is your business trying to do. I'm just Dr. No, and I'm going to sit here and just reject everything.
I mean, it's true because if you think about it, compliance officers have liability. These, AML officers have liability. So that's why we started our own company. I mean, Walitza and I, at the end of the day, because we understood saying no is not attractive. Okay, nobody's gonna want someone who just says no, 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 no. They're gonna show us the door. Let's be honest. What we do is we understand the industry, which I think is something that is becoming increasingly rare, because you hear about gambling and people are often like, oh my God, it's like tobacco, or I don't know, it's like vaping. And I'm like, no, guys, it's really not. This is an industry. This is a form of entertainment to the core. And here is ways that we can make it attractive and safe. And make sure your bottom line isn't hurt at the end of the day, which, you know, most people just want. Let's be real. I used to work for Entain. And, you know, the question was always, will it hurt our bottom line? And are we not screwing anyone over? And the answer is always, doesn't hurt your bottom line. No, we're not screwing anyone over.
Makes a lot of sense. That's really exciting. That's really exciting. So how long have you guys been in business?
We've been in business for the past, I dare to say, like 5 months.
Okay, so still pretty new.
Yeah, it's still pretty new, but it's very, very excited. I'll be very honest. I never thought that I would go this route. But, you know, life. That's all I have to say, life. I met Walitza and I met the rest of our team. We have an incredible mathematician working for us, and everybody was so motivated and so, I would dare say, out of the box, that when I started talking to them, I thought to myself, I don't think we're the typical 95 people. We really aren't. And then we got some projects here and there, and people were so satisfied, and they're like, oh, okay, so you saved us X amount of money down the line that, you know, we could have had a regulatory fine or God knows what, or bad press. And I was like, well, that's our job. And I don't know, I think for me it was obvious, but people were like so astonished by this. And I thought, okay, I think there's something here.
But it's really difficult to quantify fines that you haven't had to pay.
Yes, but there's always potential. You'd be surprised. There's always like, you basically look at the past precedents of, okay, these are the type of fines that people got in the past. This is the risk. And that's all we really do. We just lay down the risk. And at the end of the day, people take it based on their own risk appetite. I mean, I always tell clients, like, I'm not your mom. I'm not your wife. I'm not going to be like, you have to do this, you have to do that. Like, no offense to wives or husbands anyway. Let's get that out of the way. But we're here to help you. And at the end of the day, that's all we're passionate of doing.
So what have you got against marriage?
I'm not married, however, and this will be on the record, my mother is a matchmaker, so I hope she doesn't hear like this.
No way.
My mother is a matchmaker, yes.
What? Explain to me.
What, a professional matchmaker?
A professional matchmaker, yes.
How does that work? Do we like, because obviously Jon is single, not married.
We should have a conversation after this. You know?
Yeah, like can I like send in his details? Like, how do I organize this?
Absolutely. My mother is phenomenal. That means that if I say something wrong about marriage, I think she'll eat me for breakfast. But
I don't want to rain on any parades here, but I'm not actually single.
Oh, never mind.
Okay.
What can I say?
No, okay, let's get it out of the way. Marriage is a fantastic thing. It was just an example. Okay, it was just an example. I'm going to put a disclaimer here.
50% of us agree. I'm divorced. Fintan is married.
Very happily married for a very long time.
Very happily. No, I'm just backing you up.
Fintan about how to find the perfect partner. It's really hard to find the perfect consultant, perfect friend.
I was just trying to do the maths, and luckily my wife doesn't listen to this. I think 16 years.
Wow.
I think possibly 18, something like that. It's good. It's the big numbers, the double digits for sure.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
I'm just happy if I reach double digits for weeks.
Well, I can tell both of you, be happy, because dating apps are
I missed all of
these
that.
days.
I've missed all of that.
You're very lucky, Fintan. They are horrible things.
Yeah. Oh well, maybe. So one of the things, Isabelle, we wanted to talk to you about was not sports washing, but health washing.
Health washing.
So you had a really interesting, I think you listened to one of our previous episodes, and you had a really interesting comment about health washing. And it'd be really interesting to get your take, because I think the industry isn't doing it enough in a way. But we can get into that. But can you explain what it is and how it works?
Let me start with a little bit of background into the explanation I have for health washing. So I'm currently pursuing a doctorate degree in responsible gambling. So my days are spent reading research papers. Okay, so a phenomenon I've often seen in a study that really caught my attention is feigning corporate social responsibility in Ireland. And the term health washing was in the title. And I think everyone has heard of the term greenwashing, think Aaron Brockovich. But when it came to health washing, me, myself, being in this industry, I thought, I don't know what this is. So health washing is basically a strategy used to feign corporate social responsibilities. Think about, a company that promotes healthy eating, but actually sells hamburgers. Something along those lines. They are just trying to minimize or distract you from the actual problem at hand. And this particular study, which I can simply do one as well, that really caught my attention, was about the Irish hospital sweepstakes in 1930.
The world's biggest lottery at the time.
The world's biggest lottery at the time. And I thought it was such a good example. And I'm going to tell you why. Because when people talk about responsible gambling, which is a huge phenomenon these days, people talk about it, I feel like it's a new thing. We're going to be responsible. And I'm like, guys, there is the Irish hospital sweepstakes. From 1930, you can look that up. I did my research before, before starting even the doctorate, which was the charitable lottery that funded hospitals. Mm-hmm. For those who don't know, they use nurses and doctors in their advertising campaigns. You would think you see nurses, okay, I'm going to give you guys money. This is amazing, you'd think. And it wasn't. It was really like operating a lemonade stand where one lemon would go to the hospitals and the rest would go like serving cocktails to the rest of the stakeholders. And I'm saying this simply, it simplifies things, but that's what happened. And this was going on in 1930. And mind you, the name sweepstakes is in the name. So that's also quite interesting to bring up. And I think I've seen this before in, companies sometimes, they can be A students or they can have some things to learn, but health washing is a phenomenon that is present. That's just a fact. Mm-hmm. No matter where you take it, especially in the gambling industry. You say you do one thing, but you actually do something else. So when I look into this topic, and my topic specifically takes Ukraine as a case study.
Wow.
Yes. And I'm going to tell you why. Because when I was looking for what I could possibly write about in my research paper, I had a lot of previous research I read that was about responsible gambling in times of COVID, global pandemic, everyone thought we're going to die. There was a lot of uncertainty and the rise in gambling, obviously online, increased. You had virtual sports, you had esports, whatever. Casino. I never had this demand before than I did when the pandemic hit. I remember I have my sister who is a marketing executive and she told me, I have less work, but why are you working 12 hours a day? I don't understand. We are locked in our house. And I said, because people are gambling online. But when I started looking even more and more into it, and in addition to going to conferences like IGB Live, I realized that a lot of these operators were in Ukraine. And I have also a background, like my parents are from the former Soviet Union, my grandfather is from Lutsk. And I started talking to them, and it was really interesting for me because I was always, from 2021, the international advisement to the chairman of the Law Society there in Ukraine. And I was working with law firms there at the time that are now rebranding, and I would dare say even redrafting how the Gambling Commission looks like. And the more I talked about to these operators, the more I realized that there is a conflict now in Ukraine. But no one thinks about the rise in problem gambling going on.
Sure.
I mean, there's military incentives, rightly so, to give, soldiers extra disposable income. But if you really think about it, there's so much stress, uncertainty in times of war. Where does that extra income come when people are suffering from PTSD? When people, are faced with bombs every single day? And I saw statistics that really showed an increase in problem gambling. And that's a research that hasn't been done before. So that's really what I focused on.
In a time of such existential crisis nationally for Ukraine, every single recognized comorbidity for gambling is increased. I mean, massively, and it's something that's been a constant frustration when I've been having conversations with people. But the gambling conversation is a very polar one. Either super for it, super against it. I'm not sure where I sit on that line, but I'm not against it. Let's put it that way. But it's kind of there's often a failure to recognize that there is in almost every instance more to a gambling problem than gambling. And something that I think it was Sarah Ramanauskas-Fintan was pinpointing is that as well as the play environment, what kind of game is it, what kind of operating system, what kind of bonusing, all of those things that come together in a game, the actual environment that the player is in physically, their world, their life, is a major factor in the amplification of harmful or potentially harmful elements. And so war could be like a super magnifier for this. That was kind of where you were going, I think, wasn't it?
Well, it makes sense. Like if you're some poor Ukrainian soldier sat on the front line or near the front line, and you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, and you've got 50 euros in your betting account or casino account, like, are you really going to go, oh, well, maybe I'll wait? It's so you just say fuck it and just gamble, because every moment's a gamble right now in terms of a drone strike or an artillery shell or a sniper or whatever.
And mind you that the ban on gambling in Ukraine was only lifted on August 11, 2020. Only, a couple of years ago.
But the ban hadn't been there for that long, though, had it? Because I remember going to events in Ukraine, because Ukraine used to have a thriving casino industry. Sorry?
They do still.
Okay. But
when you think about the ban, I mean, we're also talking about online.
Yeah, sure.
Not something people have to go on. Everything is online, and a lot of operators are also in Ukraine. I mean, there's a lot.
So in terms of your PhD study, if you're studying, like, how do you, like, obviously not all of Ukraine is a war zone, but the country's at war. Like, how do you conduct your research? Are you doing surveys? Are you getting data from operators, the government? Like, how does that work?
Great question.
One correction there. My degree is a doctorate in business administration. So mine is very much also focused on balancing ethical responsibilities with basically how to thrive and minimize the economic repercussions. So that's just one correction. So that even makes it more interesting.
Yeah.
At least to me, I did that on purpose, that not to do just a PhD, but make sure of how can I not be blacklisted by operators in Ukraine and say, no, you guys can thrive, but this is how. So I work very closely with a law firm that is now kind of, to give you a bit of background, the Commission of the Regulation of Gambling and Lottery in Ukraine is likely going to change. I say likely because, nothing's 100% right now. There is a draft law in the making. So there is a lot of conversations going on regarding how we can improve drafting that. And I'm hoping that my research will give them a bit of a practical viewpoint and points that they can implement. So a lot of these are by calls, Skype, talking to potentially military personnel to see if they saw, firsthand how, soldiers battling with PTSD. I have quite a few contacts there, even before the escalation of the war in 2022, because working with a law firm there, just by, who do you know, working with therapists who are working with those who are serving in the army, battling with PTSD. So a lot of it is really about utilizing my network, calling people, those who managed to leave Ukraine for a while, those who had the opportunity to potentially meet them somewhere for a face-to-face. I do have to admit that there is a huge point of confidentiality that I have to adhere to, and I do this on purpose. I never master names. I make sure that I have, let's say, a sample size of, let's say, 12 people to understand the deeper issues. So to answer your question in a nutshell, it's mostly about calls, interviews. I don't know yet if I can make it from now to Kiev, but I think that's one of the things that I really want to do and sit down with people there, especially from the commission. And if they're going to have a new state body, that's going to be a great opportunity to sit down and see how they can curb problem gambling. So these conversations are now taking place. But I definitely need to, as you edit your podcast, I need to make sure I edit my conversations as well.
Yes, of course. That's super interesting. So in terms of obviously, if you're for your doctorate, you'd have had to do a proposal. So
yes,
what's the main kind of focus of your study then? So it's studying problem gambling in a war zone.
It's studying
what's the kind of outcome you're looking for?
About basically the title, which I hope is finalized by now. I have to wait for my advisor to tell me what he thinks.
Work in
progress, let's put it that way. Navigating Ukraine's problem gambling in times of conflict. And I look at crisis management, corporate social responsibility, the stakeholders involved, protection of players, and the economic repercussions, because at the end of the day, I understand that it really helps the economy. Let's be real, it helps the economy, but what can we do to make sure you still have a thriving industry, but protecting the players at hand? And why I chose, in times of conflict, because in times where there is the escalation of the war right now, and I say escalation because there were always conflicts before, no one really, the Prime Minister is not going to now think about problem gambling as much. Okay, he has bigger fish to fry. Yeah. Let's be real. Yeah. But it's still an issue at hand. So the research itself, and I work with a fantastic advisor who is helping me manage how to rethink problem gambling in times of conflict where, countries have other things on their mind and maybe have more leniency towards problem gambling, at the end of the day. And how can we balance that approach? Because everything at the end of the day is interlinked. And that's the core of this research, of how can we make sure that we have proactive strategies in times, and I'm thinking Ukraine because it's an extreme case right now. Mm-hmm. People have other things on their mind.
Yeah.
So I hope this answers your question.
No, it does. It's super fascinating. So, okay, so if we pivot then to health washing,
mm-hmm.
So I'm a gambling firm, and I've got some pesky people on Twitter complaining about me, and maybe there's an article in the Daily Mail about something my VIP team have done or not done, more likely. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, right, I need to sort this out. What do I do?
I think the question would be, what's the article about?
So
everything is context.
It's they didn't do affordability checks on some VIPs and were encouraging them to gamble way beyond their means. Is the context. as an example.
We have stories like that where people come to us, for example, after there was an incident, and the first thing that I would recommend is look at your operations. How did this happen in the first place? Because what we really do is we make sure that not only companies adhere by the rules, we make sure that they adopt strategies that are sustainable for them, that they can actually do. And that's all that matters. First thing I would say is look how this happened in the first place. I'm not talking about finding, the black sheep in the family. We're not blaming. Nobody is to blame.
It's definitely Fintan.
That's one thing I always tell, whoever we work with. I'm like, we're not looking for a scapegoat right now. I don't care who's to blame. Okay, we're Switzerland here. We're nice and pretty. We're gonna work on both sides. So that's one thing. I would look at how this happened in the first place.
Sure.
Then I would look at how you can, first and foremost, manage strategies so that it doesn't happen again before you go and make amends. I say, in the larger pictures with the press, at the end of the day, good press comes if you do your job. If you do, if a company operates really well, then the good press follows. And that's kind of what I believed, because I'm not.
Do you think so?
Yes.
Do you think so? Because
I do think so.
My view would be, if you're doing a good job and you're doing everything completely above board and there's no issues, that's not news and nobody writes about it. That's just you doing your job. And then when you make one mistake or whatever, then that's news and they'll write about it. And so I think there is a double standard. Obviously, the bad stories that come out are dreadful and shouldn't happen. But there is slightly a double standard of, like, this company turned down business and is making slightly less money than they could be because they're doing everything completely ethical. Like, the Daily Mail, and I'm picking on the Daily Mail, it could be any of them, is never going to write that story because that's not an interesting story as far as they're concerned. I
wonder if the Daily Mail is going to write you after this. Which story?
We've had Rob Davies on from The Guardian talking about his book. So yeah, maybe the Daily Mail next. But I get your point. Like, if you do good things,
it's not automatic. Let's be honest. First and foremost, the media. I have so many things to say about the media. The media is a circus. You have so many stories coming on every single day. I've seen companies. I'm going to take a wild example. Okay, something that's not a secret. That's something you can look up. VGW or Stake regarding sweepstakes.
Sure.
Michigan, I believe it was the control board, are not exactly happy with their operations right now. Good press or bad press?
I would consider it bad press because they were stupid for operating in a state where online casino had been regulated, and there's a lot more of America. Michigan's not that big of a state. There's a lot more of America they could have just cracked on and just avoided the eye of Sauron of a regulator. By just turning off that state would have been my view. So it was just pure stupidity or greed or lack of attention. I don't know what it was, but it definitely wouldn't have happened on my watch. Is my view on that one.
Okay, Steak, if you're hearing this, Fintan is happy to be the new CEO.
No.
He's more of a chairman figure than a CEO.
Jon, what do you think? Good or bad press? I'm very interested to hear your thoughts.
I don't know if I've got any.
Okay,
there's a lot of times when I'm just not thinking at all.
I envy you. My brain barely shuts off. It's a big problem. My point being is, whether you're in the gambling industry, whether you are in a different industry, bad press is never something to think that it's positive. I once worked with a PR agent who said all press is good press. And I'm like, no, it's not, guys. No, it's not. The question is, what steps are they taking to minimize the risk afterwards? And I'm talking about minimizing risk. And I'm going to use this phrase continuously, I think, throughout my career. Because yes, you can have a mistake done. That's why I always tell clients, even before you apply for the license, make sure we take a look at how you're doing things so you don't. But let's say if a company missteps, we don't believe that it's the end of the world. I mean, unless it's something extraordinary, and I'm saying, I don't know, the 1% of the cases that they're doing, let's say how they did, VGW in Kentucky or the rest in, Michigan. It's not smart to do. The question is, what are they going to do in other states? And why I'm saying this, for this particular case, Michigan is an example that's going to cause a national conversation.
Yeah.
So the story is always more interesting than it seems. That's why I don't like reading the headlines only. I like to see the story, what's going on, how is it going on. And that's also why, I think Willits and I, when we saw the CompliancePlay, we really loved, just the gambling industry, because nothing is black and white. Everything is about context. Everything is about, we have clients who ask us, can we do this, yes or no? And I'm like, for future reference, if anybody tells you yes or no on the spot, don't trust them. Okay. We can give you an explanation, but that's how that's the extent of it.
I think, for one thing, whenever people use the expression no publicity is bad publicity, that's a massive red flag immediately. It's just, and a story popped into my head when I thought, no, when people say that, they're just not right in the head. And I was remembering, you remember the fucking awful shooting in Las Vegas a few years ago. Well, one of the headlines that followed that some months later was that MGM was suing the victims. Now, there's no positive way to spin that story. But the point is, and actually this does tie in what you were just saying, Isabelle, the way that news is consumed now, or rather not consumed by a very large amount of people, the headline, the synopsis, is more important than it's ever been.
Mm-hmm.
And what people don't necessarily take on board, and I'm speaking solely from a production perspective, the wording in headlines is more often than not chosen because of the amount of space it has to fit in. It has to mean what the story says, but it has to fit in a certain space. And this is part of a sub-editor's real skill set, is creating a headline that means the same as the story, but fits in the right space without having to be shrunk too much or blown up too much or whatever. But the way that we consume news, I mean, en masse, not talking about us three, it's changed so much, and it's all about the quick bite. That headlines, the MGM story is far more nuanced than that headline, but that headline's shit, isn't it? And that headline is the first impression. It's that simple. Because there are 9 million ways to absorb the news now, nobody's going to go, well, shit, that can't be right. I better read that story. There's going to be, look at those bastards.
Yeah, because you're going to, but you see companies do this deliberately. So Lego is a great example of this, where about a year or so ago, they made a big fuss about developing a sustainable. Basically, the Lego blocks are made from plastic, which is ultimately made from oil. So they were developing a Lego block that used no oil, right? Or a plastic that used no oil, or whatever. They were basically a sustainable Lego brick was their whole thing. And they'd started off with some trees and some small parts in the Lego sets, and a lot of publicity about this and what was happening, what was doing. And then very quietly, they scrapped the project. And so you've got the big fuss, and then it's like, oh, actually, we can't make a brick without using copious amounts of oil.
Health washing.
And it goes back to your point of health washing. Like if you look at the major gambling groups, Paddy Power Betfair rebranded as Flutter.
Mm-hmm.
BWin became Entain.
Mm-hmm.
Triple Eight became Evoke.
Mm-hmm.
So there are these, okay, Flutter kind of nods to gambling, but in a really kind of soft £2 on the national lottery type bet. Evoke could be a car or an Ewok or...
I mean, rebranding in general is never a bad idea. That's why when we just started talking and you asked me about CompliancePlay, I say we really want to make sure we rebrand just the term compliance to make sure that, you know, it's not a bad word. We're here to help you maximize profits, to make sure that you're adhering by all the rules. But when you talk about the other side of, you know, rebranding and only doing it for the good price, that's something that's going to catch up if, you know, people are not doing what they're supposed to do sooner or later. And I'm talking not about now, I'm talking in the future, because rebranding in the terms of what you would say about Flutter, for example, sometimes it's just about a plaster. We put a plaster on the problems, and that's never, you know, if you ever watched the series of Dr. House, I'm obsessed with this TV show. I think I watched it like 3 times. Would never go to medical school, but I love House. And he always said you have to find the cause of the problems. You have to find the root. And that's really what is important in all rebranding strategies. How can you make sure that, okay, now you messed up, fine, we're all human. You know, everyone makes mistakes. How can we learn from it? How can we make sure it doesn't happen again? So, like I said, headlines, guys, whoever are listening to this, don't just read the headlines. Read the story. Have someone else read the stories. Listen to a podcast, but make sure you get the context.
So if you're from the outside looking in and you see a gambling firm comes out and says, we are on a path to zero revenue from problem gamblers or something to that effect, which I think every gambling firm should come out and say this and have concrete stuff in place to do this. It'll take time. It's probably impossible is the issue. But it can definitely be, you know, if you measure it, I think you can reduce it. But you could have 2 firms who make the same statement, and one could be approaching it with good intentions, and one could be using the "thank you for not smoking" playbook of just, which is one of the best books ever written. Of just, we'll keep confusing and muddying the water and kick the ball down the road for as long as we can get away with it. From the outside looking in, how is there signs or is there ways to tell who genuinely means it and who's just health washing and just paying lip service to it?
The key, I think, is going to be in the subtext, because the ones that are actually going to take this initiative is going to tell you how. How are they taking this initiative? And they're going to tell you this on the spot. Because if they have a good PR team, a good marketing team, they're going to tell you, we're not doing this because we have now a very good and automated self-exclusion program. We have betting limits right now. We have session reminders, and we do this because of X, Y, and Z. And this you will see maybe even in the headline, you know, companies who really do and take these proactive strategies, make sure you know about them, okay? To tell you that somebody does something because of only goodwill, you know, let's be real. I'm not Mother Teresa, and neither perhaps are you or anybody else. Not against like any of you, but I'm saying we're not Mother Teresa. They're gonna make sure that you know what they're doing. And this has been carefully crafted. So from experience, I would say once you start reading the subtext and a CEO is saying, we've implemented a self-exclusion program that works X, Y, Z. We've implemented session reminders, you know, not just this is what we're doing.
So it's the details. They're really kind of, okay, here's the steps we're taking, here's the KPIs. And for me to add on to that, the one I always like doing is when you get like quarterly reports or annual reports from these companies and you compare them over the last, say, few quarters or year, the companies are in trouble are the ones that constantly keep changing their metrics. So they're constantly, look at this metric. Oh, this metric's now brilliant. Yes. And then it's all about that metric. And then they don't mention it again next quarter. It's a different. So, but it's the ones that are like really consistent of how they report the metrics that they're using. And there's kind of there's a discipline to that, which I think goes to your point of, I'm using it for like looking at share prices and who's valued and whatever. But I think your point of that consistency over time shows then it's embedded in the culture, rather than it gets mentioned one quarter because there were some bad headlines, and then they slowly kind of just start fading it out. So hopefully everybody forgets and they move on to the next.
To even add to that, there's not much to add, but it's not just about the consistency, which is key, but it's also about motivations. And I really believe that, because you have to always look at the bigger picture. And this is what Melissa and I always say to whoever we work with. Let's say now Brazil, hot topic.
Yeah, very.
There was a big debate a little bit about bonuses, are they allowed or not? And I think I've read the regulation, 10 times by now, because you have to. What are you going to say? A, that's what you have to do, and B, all the details.
Are bonuses not allowed?
No, loyalty programs, yes, under an umbrella of rules, let's say. But
because you couldn't, I thought you couldn't do a deposit bonus, but you could do
you cannot do
no deposit bonus.
Exactly. But the loyalty programs, for example, there's still restrictions, are allowed. So the question is always, it's never black and white, and the motivators behind, doing the right thing is as important as consistency. Because as you say, I'm going to give you an example, one I really love, AI. Topic of the century. Okay, I can't live without ChatGPT right now. I don't know about you guys, but like ChatGPT is like everything.
I use it a lot, yeah.
So NVIDIA, for example, skyrocketed, face of AI. I read an article, I think it was a week or two ago, that the stock prices have never been as bad as, I don't know what it was, like 2 weeks ago. And that contributed to, I think there was a dip in NVIDIA stock. I'm not quite sure how it's going on now. But AI, for example, you have to look about the trends. How are people feeling towards it? It's never really like one size fits all. AI is great, and then people are like, okay, but what are the drawbacks? And all of a sudden people are talking about the drawbacks. And a week later, people are talking about, what's the good thing about AI? Gambling is sometimes the same thing. People are talking about what's really good about it, what's really bad about it. But I do believe that you maintain consistency and you have this motivation to do that.
Okay.
You're
that makes sense. That does make sense. Sorry. Okay. So health washing. So do you feel health washing is happening in the gambling industry?
Yes. It's happening in the industry. The gambling industry is a little bit different than, let's say, the tobacco industry. I threw that example because I knew I would get this reaction. It always hits a nerve, when I say this. I can tell you why. The World Health Organization, on the Convention of Tobacco, requires all signatories to protect health policies from having commercial or vested interest. That's a fact. I think it was 5.3. The gambling industry doesn't have this. This is a distinction that I usually draw, is that, the tobacco is like, okay, this is an extreme example, but they have controls that you can't have commercial interest, for example.
But there's a lot of context behind, like, what the tobacco industry did up until then, with like paying off scientists, faking research. Cigarettes do cause cancer and lots of different types of cancer.
But look at back in the day in Ireland, of the days of the Irish hospital sweepstakes, the Gambling Awareness Trust was backed up by like 30 bookmakers.
For sure. They were selling tickets in New York. Like, it was
exactly.
Huge.
Exactly.
Boston and stuff. So it was
Fintan, as any worthy smoking advocate will tell you, most smokers don't die from cancer.
Do they not?
No, it's usually heart disease.
Medical professional, I'm not going to add to that.
It's nearly always heart disease that gets them first.
It's the heart disease that gets you first.
Thing is, though, right, with the gambling industry, and I don't know if this would count as health washing, right? And I'm probably going to piss a lot of people off what I'm about to say, just for a change. Regulatory compliance, such as it is, businesses will do largely the minimum they have to comply with, and very little beyond that. And it's understandable. Compliance is not a cheap thing, but it leaves the ball firmly in the court of the regulatory bodies to stay on top, to stay kind of fluid, to react when things aren't working properly. And these bodies are generally quite big, quite bloated, and they can't move quickly. And sometimes it needs laws to change, et cetera, et cetera. But, right? If people are doing the bare minimum, they're monitoring the players, they're using the software, they're flagging players to do blah, 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 all of which exists right now. And assuming the land-based is also doing the same, could you argue that doing the bare minimum for regulatory compliance is almost health washing? Because they're not doing everything they could be, but they're doing the minimum that's being asked for them and saying, look, we support responsible gambling because we do the things that we've been told we have to do. Is that the same as health washing?
Can I jump in and then do
No.
devil's advocate? Like, if you do the opposite,
No.
you're like, well, then we might
Fintan,
as
I
well
said no.
shut the business down.
I fucking said no, Finn. You said, can I jump in? I said no. You jumped in anyway.
So the ultimate protection is like, there is no gambling because we've shut our business down. And then where's the happy middle?
I don't even know why you asked if you could jump in.
I kind of liked Fintan's comment. If I may jump into that, I actually
Fuck
add
both
to that.
of you.
I don't know how I can save myself from this one. This question is so prominent. Jokes aside, this is what we do every single day. We talk about what's the minimum. Okay, what's the bare minimum? Question is, personally, I don't think it's health washing. And I'm going to tell you why. Health washing is, have you guys ever watched the movie Aaron Brockovich?
No.
I have. In fact, I may have seen it twice.
I've seen it.
But I know the premise of the...
You know the
story.
premises, okay. For those listening, if they don't know, it's mostly about greenwashing, but Julia Roberts does a better job at portraying the story than I ever could. So greenwashing in that scenario was about masking problems that were there and not doing as these companies had to do. If you do the bare minimum, you're doing something. You're not health washing. If, let's say, a company, I don't know, doesn't have session reminders, but they say, we are doing, we're choreographing this responsible gambling program so that we have session reminder, that's something else. But if you do the bare minimum, you're doing something, and something is better than nothing at the end of the day. It's when you don't do anything and you ignore what regulators are telling you, and you throw a big, campaign of, I'm going to say the Irish hospital sweepstakes that they did, like huge parties, like back in the day, with cocktails made from the lemons that were supposed to go, to the hospitals. That's a different story. But in my point of view, in my humble point of view, I'm going to say it like this: something is better than nothing. And if they're doing something, they're already on a road to do even more.
We don't do humble on this podcast.
I try. I mean, I'm not going to pretend I know it all, but
we do that.
But I agree, because it's, we're meeting the legal requirements, and then, but I think very few are just doing the minimum.
Yeah,
would be my guess. And I think as well, if I was sitting in the hot seat at an operator, it's like that old, you travel to where the puck is going, not to where it is. So you'd be you'd be scanning the regulatory landscape across all the jurisdictions you're in. You'll have a sense of where regulators are going or what could possibly happen. And you'd be getting ready for that, or maybe getting ahead of it. So, you know, if about like you saw this in the UK, there was a lot of voluntary code type stuff.
Yes.
Which then removes the need for legislation, which then makes things a little bit easier to deal with, and these kind of things. So I think there's a huge benefit in being proactive, and that's why I really stand by my thing of like every operator should come out and say we're going to work towards zero problem gambling. These are the steps we're going to take, and it's going to take a while. And it's
simpleton.
It's going to be difficult, and it's not going to be, you know, it'll be very hard to get it to zero. But here's what we're going to be implementing over the next, you know, here's our roadmap, and we'll use the best science and technology available, and we'll start implementing.
Isabelle Fintan got told off on Twitter recently.
Really?
For saying that all operators should start with zero problem gamblers as a baseline desire. Which, you know, yes, it's very noble, Fintan, but it's blah, blah, blah. Well, why shouldn't that be your baseline? Why shouldn't that be your baseline?
I actually want to add to what Fintan said. It's actually very interesting that you say, you know, people do the bare minimum. They see where like the puck is rolling. I have a different perspective, and I see this in our company, for example. We do market monitoring reports. So we make sure that board of directors are always notified in advance of the changes. One of the recent ones, for example, in Croatia, there is the implementation of the self-exclusion program by the Institute of Public Health by 2026. We already now have demand how to implement it. So actually, I see a trend that companies are saying, oh, we hear something's going on. I'm taking Croatia as an example, because that was the recent thing that caught my attention of, you know, the changes happening there in terms of responsible gambling. What are we going to do? And I'm talking about the changes that, you know, will likely be established in 2026. And I see the demand for these reports. You know, these are very simple executive summaries, timelines. 2025, this is what you have to uphold. You know, 2026 is when it's going to start. And I think that people now understand the benefit of staying ahead of the game and not just going with, you know, what's right now.
But it's such a, like, if you look at, like, you brought up Brazil earlier on, and I think Brazil is a great example. Huge market.
Huge.
It's been operated as a grey market up until now. Regulations are meant to be coming in, or licensing is meant to come in on the 1st of January. But
exactly.
There's an asterisk on that. Maybe it's delayed. Potentially issues with bonuses.
I wouldn't say issues. I think the current regulations are very... They require you to, you know, put it under a microscope. But I had a feature recently on global gambling news in Brazil, and there are ways to do it and be innovative. And I'm talking about strategic partnerships. But what we're talking about here, and it's very important, I think, to clarify, those that are over $6 million, I think it was the equivalent of $6 million, more than welcome. It's a huge market with a very high barrier to entry. Yep. And they do this on purpose. That's just facts, I think. They do this on purpose so that the larger organizations know exactly what they're dealing with in this market. And now, I think the last one we did for a few affiliates, we looked at what kind of bonuses were required, loyalty programs, this and that. And I don't think there's any discrepancy till date. If there's any delay, potentially, but it's still going to be a regulated market with a very high barrier to entry.
So it'll be the big operators only, which are easier to regulate in theory, rather than trying to regulate 200.
I mean, those who have more at stake, let's be honest, those who have more to lose.
That's a good point.
You know, at the end of the day, you have 6 million that you're going to put in a license, and we have a lot of, you know, talks with organizations who are like, okay, what do you think we should do? We give them a rundown of, is this going to be worth your time? Because it's a huge investment. And the bigger the investment, the bigger the risk. That's always, you know, that's how it is. And so people are very aware of this risk, which is why we have steps of like, okay, this is what you can do, this is what you can do, these are the opportunities. these are the strategic approaches that you can take when it comes to Brazil. But Brazil in itself, I love that it's such a hot topic. But it's especially a hot topic if you have over 6 million,
Yeah, for sure. And it's a super interesting one.
I was just thinking while you crazy kids were talking. I was thinking, do you think it's funny, right, that people are very critical of the industry, and sometimes or frequently they're very critical of individual operators in the industry?
Mm-hmm.
Do you not think that the ire of people and the ire of The Guardian and other critical organizations should be focused on the regulators? But the thing is, right, if you're critical of an individual organization and maybe they have fucked up, maybe they've done something that breaches regulatory guidelines, right? Maybe they haven't, but that's for the regulator to handle. If you think that the law isn't doing enough, that's for the regulator to handle, because no industry is going to unilaterally agree to make changes across the board that it doesn't have to. So surely the pressure should be brought to bear on the regulator in these instances.
I love this topic. I had an interview with iGaming Future where I talked about, and you may not like this, but I'm going to say it anyways, about how I support self-regulation. And I say this, and I know it's going to, have comments. Why?
It's going to take me a minute to get my eyebrows down. Hold on.
Take all the time that you need. And I'm going to tell you why. Because operators, they're in this industry like no one else. I have seen from an AML point of view. I've seen from a compliance point of view. I've seen it from an external consultant point of view, the ins and outs of the gambling industry. Now, regulators, I'm not shitting on anyone, let's be honest. Regulators have the same, but they need to have an open dialogue with operators. They need to make sure, and I'm saying need to, okay, I would like them to make sure that, what they're doing in terms of gambling laws has a double-edged sword. It helps companies to thrive. I mean, this is post-pandemic days. Come on, people need to live. People need to make a living. And I love this industry. I think it's so dynamic and I think it's so challenging. If people have other opinions, that's entirely up to them, and that's fine. But it's an industry in itself that employs a lot of jobs. And I think if the dialogue is open and transparent between the regulators and the operators, that's where the magic can happen. And to just say, it's like I'm telling you, I had a brief career in politics. I'm saying brief, in quotations, where I would see politicians doing crazy things. Are you going to say that the government is to blame because of what these politicians are doing? If a prime minister has a scandal, is that the fault of the government? So I don't really believe in having, this is one body which has oversight. And I say oversight because, it's their job. But from experience, and I used to work a lot in, let's say, African countries, I work with regulators to make sure that they understand what are the needs of the business, so they can keep that into consideration when making these laws. So it's not too restrictive and it's not too lenient, and you can still operate really well. Because I do believe at the core of it, you want to watch a sports game and you want to place a bet, go place a bet. Problem gambling at the end of the day, it's about persistent and recurring issues. If you gamble once in a while as a form of entertainment, what wrong are you doing?
So so you opened up with a bold statement of the self-regulation piece.
I know.
Do you mean like no regulators and just let the industry sort itself out? Or?
No. I mean, there is oversight, as there should be. But I think that operators need to take more matters into their own hands.
And is it more like, if you take the UK's example, where it's more principles-based rather than, these are the exact rules you need to follow? Is it that kind of more principles-based type thing you're talking about? Or is it more nuanced than that?
Yes and no. I mean, the UK is now a sensitive topic, I think, with the affordability checks coming in. I don't know if I want to dive into that because I might be like left with a lot of mean comments because it's such a sensitive topic. But yes and no. I think when operators kind of take it into their own hands and become very innovative in the solutions, they're going to have very few, I would say, issues down the line with regulators. Because regulators are there for oversight. They understand the legislative bills that need to be done. The legislative bills sometimes doesn't address the day-to-day issues of the sector. And at the end of the day, operators, they do. I mean, I've been doing this job for years. I've been into this industry for years. I can understand already, the problem in gambling times, the bonuses, the AML, about having, the need for marketing in a certain sense, advertising requirements. I'm talking about the broad spectrum. And so that's what Willitza, who I work with, who has gone through all areas, in the gambling industry, in all various roles. And these are the type of people I think regulators should talk to, because we can help set up a system where you can, I'm not going to say promote, but you can assist the industry to thrive, but do so safely. This comes back to my initial joke where I had the feeling that when people said I'm a compliance officer, I would be at Burning Man or at Tomorrowland with a checklist saying, guys, the music is too loud. What the hell are you guys doing? Whereas now I hope, and if someone has something else to say, then I hope the statement is correct. I'm the one, the company CompliancePlay hopefully is the one that makes sure that the festival is set up so well that the lights are brighter, the music is harder, and everyone's having the time of their life. So I hope this answers your questions, and I hope I'm so not going to get mean comments out of this.
No, you'll be fine. You'll be fine. Nobody's going
to.
It
is what it is. I mean, people on social media have mean comments all the time. I mean, Fintan, I'm going to look at your Twitter account next.
It's very boring.
I think it's pretty much just me and Fintan that get the mean comments. Even when we had friend of the podcast, Gambling Commission CEO Andrew Rhodes on, I think mostly it was me being called a clown.
Yeah, I think so.
Well, everyone loves going to the circus. I don't see that as a bad thing.
They love that shit. It's a very good point. I probably got away with it if I were a polar bear.
Listen, I was raised by parents who informed me, so if you to piss me off, you're going to have to work very hard. I don't see, I don't see the mean comments. People are going to say whatever they're going to say. If it helps you feel any better, I love listening to you guys' podcast.
Oh, thank you so much. No, it's okay. It's just one person. It's fine.
It's probably like, I don't know, someone in the middle of nowhere behind.
I've even invited him onto the podcast.
Doing the right thing, and I'm sure the place is going to follow.
Extend and embrace. Brilliant, Isabelle.
But I genuinely do think you did the right thing inviting him on the podcast, because
I'm going to give him a reminder.
But the way that everything works now, the way that algorithms work and all that, all we see all fucking day is stuff that's like what we like. There is no room in what we're supplied for contrary points of view. And that's fucking ridiculous. That's not how you expand your knowledge. That's not how to expand your brain. That's how to enhance a polar argument. That's not how grown-ups work, surely. So yeah, fucking bring him on. He sounds great. I already like him.
Everyone loves the debate. Look at the latest debate between Trump and Biden. So what everyone's talking about lately, it was how can I say this? An acquired taste to watch, but everyone's talking about it. So
it'll be interesting.
If you don't like one size fits all, you're in the right industry, because this is the industry for debates. And this is the industry for challenges and polar opposites, where it gets the conversation flowing.
Truth. One last question, Isabelle. Are you familiar with Cobra Kai? Have you watched it?
I haven't watched it. Should I? I have homework to do now.
It's very good. It is very good.
Perfect answer. I'm too busy.
If Fintan watches Aaron Brockovich, I'll watch Cobra Kai.
No, I'm not doing her.
No?
Aaron Brockovich is very good, Fintan.
It's so
I
good.
don't have time for that.
Not the series. The series wasn't very good at all. But just the movie, it's like, it's 2 hours.
No.
It's one of Albert Finney's best roles.
I don't care. I've got the premise. Plucky waitress, learns law, takes the big company, makes the money. I'm sure it's heartwarming. I get it, but I just, no.
And it's an interesting real life story, obviously.
I'd rather read the book.
It's okay. I will still watch Cobra Kai. I was just like checking what I could do here.
I'm really anti Aaron Brockovich.
I'll tell you what, I'll watch Aaron Brockovich again and I'll send Fintan my notes.
Thanks, John.
Yes, the Cliff Notes.
It could work, but I do remember I actually went to see it in the cinema.
Wow.
So I think I was working
that's how old he is.
I was working in a bookshop at the time, and I hope nobody
Julia Roberts was big.
I hope nobody from that time is listening, but I bunked off for the afternoon and went to the pictures. And it was the middle of winter, and it was like there was just nobody on the streets. No, I mean, I didn't. I probably went at the weekend. Yeah, that's it. That's the story I'm sticking to. Let's make a note to edit that part out. I remember I left the cinema with what I can only describe as a man crush on Aaron Eckhart, who played Julia Roberts' neighbor who becomes boyfriend. Not in anything else he's in, but in Aaron Brockovich, he's absolutely lovely. So, what can I say?
I'm impressed by this one.
That's his default expression when I'm speaking.
I'm dead inside. That's what it is. There's nothing going on.
You've done this so many times. You're like, okay. Well,
You find, Isabelle, that when you're talking, he's all like, he's engaged. He's like a puppy and you've got a treat. When I talk, the puppy dies.
John.
what can
On
I
that
say?
note, Isabelle, thank you for joining Fintan.
Thank you both for having me.
Thanks for joining us. It's great.
Thank you.